It begs the question, Josh, how we got to this point. And you talked to the Prime Minister, of course, tonight about his take on all of this. He talked a little bit about the fact that, we have to stamp out and call out anti-Semitism everywhere we see it. Here he is.
The targeting of a business because it happens to be owned by someone who happens to be Jewish is, in my view, anathema to what Australia represents. It's not who we are, and that's why we need to call out anti-Semitism when we see it.
Now, the PM said all the right things to you in the doco, but you and certainly John Howard in the documentary tonight and I and many others have been quite critical of him and his government's response to anti-Semitism, basically, not stemming it since what happened on the steps of the Opera House on October the 9th. It's a lack of leadership, I suppose. Having sat down with the Prime Minister and discussed this, do you get the impression that he actually cares and actually wants to do something about it, or is it saying the right words to the right audience?
Well, I don't think he's backing up the words with action. While I'd hope he'd comprehend the gravity of the situation, I'd like to see a lot stronger action from here. We can't just replay what we've seen over the last 8 months for the next 8 months. We need a reset from government. We need to see strong, decisive leadership because, as John Howard did say in the documentary, the Prime Minister of the day sets the tone for the country. And there have been red lines that have been clearly crossed. And the law, even the Prime Minister himself acknowledged, is not being enforced in this country. How can you have people preaching jihad? How can you have the events outside the Opera House and in Caulfield and nobody being charged as a result? That begs the question, where is our law enforcement? Where is our Human Rights Commission? And where is our government when such terrible things have happened? And people are living in fear. And this is not 1934, this is 2024 in Australia. And as Julia Gillard said, we're much better than that. And there are so many people in this documentary from all walks of life who are ringing the alarm bell, not least of whom was Sir Peter Cosgrove, one of the most distinguished and decorated Australians, who said Hitler would be proud of the violent anti-Semitism that we're now seeing in Australia. If that's not a warning sign to our leaders that they have to lift their game, I don't know what is.
Let's step into fantasy land for a little minute and just imagine that you're still the member for Kooyong and you are Prime Minister. I know it's a chuckle, and I won't ask you the question if you're going to run again. We've been there before. But let's imagine that you're currently Prime Minister. You talk about this reset. The country needs a reset in terms of anti-Semitism. What would you do as leader of the country to stem and, I suppose, more importantly, reverse the rise of anti-Semitism that we've seen?
Well, firstly, for all those headline writers for tomorrow, I'm not, the leader of the country, and I'm enjoying life outside of politics. But what I do think we need is both hard and soft power, more of that. When I talk about hard power, it's the law enforcement. I think we've got to see people face the consequences for incitement to violence and to hate. And Caleb, you, Liz, James, have every night been talking about what's happening on our university campuses. And I have to tell you, I'm so disappointed and by the failure of our university leadership, chancellors and vice-chancellors, to actually take the moral high ground and to actually take on the mob which cannot be appeased on these campuses. So I'd like to see people who say from the river to the sea, Palestine to be free. I would like to see them pay to face sanctions, to face the consequences of that statement, because that statement is calling for the abolition of the State of Israel. And with respect to soft power, I'd like to see more education, because clearly there's a gap, particularly with our young people, in their understanding, with their comprehension, with their knowledge of World War II, of the Holocaust, and indeed of the history of the Middle East. because Israel's existence did not start in 1948. It goes back thousands of years from a Jewish connection to the State of Israel. And you can see that in the Western Wall there. And whether it's the use of lawfare in the ICC and the ICJ, calling Israel a genocidal state, whether it's the allegation that Israel is a apartheid state, or whether it's the notion that Israel is a colonial state, all of those statements are factually inaccurate and wrong, and they're all designed to delegitimise the state of Israel, and that is not in the world's interest, and it's certainly not in Australia's interest, because our bilateral relationship has been strong, and as we heard in the program, Zionism and believing in the state of Israel is something that that a number of very good people believe in.
Josh, the documentary effectively knits together many of the instances of Jew hatred in Australia since October 7. You asked the Prime Minister whether we need our incitement laws, to be beefed up, given they're proving useless. For those viewers at home who didn't hear what he had to say in reply, here he is.
One of my concerns is that there are laws there that I don't think have been implemented. Let's reinforce what's there. If people are breaking the law, then they should be prosecuted. That's why we have laws.
But it's already very obvious these laws simply aren't working. We've seen none of the mob rejoicing on the steps of the Opera House prosecuted, none of the hate preachers prosecuted, none of those responsible for doxing Jewish Australians prosecuted. What do you make of the inaction of our state and federal governments, given these laws were literally created for such a time as this?
Well, I think the lack of law enforcement, Liz, has been a green light to the mob, as you say, which cannot be appeased. And they've been emboldened by the inaction of our governments, emboldened by the inaction of law enforcement, emboldened by the inaction of our institutions, including the Human Rights Commission. And these people cannot be appeased. So we need to see a lot tougher action, because the lesson of history is that bad things happen when good people stay silent. And turning the other cheek, hoping this will all go away, is not good enough. It's certainly not good enough for the many, many Jewish Australians who are feeling unsafe and fearful here in Australia.
Josh, I just got to ask you, obviously in the course of filming the documentary you became quite emotional. We saw tonight that you cried at one person's story. You would be more aware as a member of the Jewish community than many of us exactly how bad things are. But were you in any way almost shocked to discover some of the stories you heard and to learn exactly how bad it was from some other people's perspectives?
Certainly, when I spoke to Maggie and Josh, who own this gift shop in Thornbury in Melbourne, and I heard about the death threats against their 5-year-old, which followed Josh being doxed. He's also a musician, and their shop being vandalised, and the personal trauma and pain and hate that was directed towards them. That is just simply unacceptable, and you could only, feel their pain when you met with them, and that was what opened the floodgates to the emotion and to the tears. And judging by the response of tonight's documentary, many Australians have felt the same way watching what happened. And you also referenced, Caleb, talking to the Holocaust survivors. They were so inspirational, and they had this inner strength. But they also had fear. And to hear them have fear in their late 90s is again another sign that what has happened in Australia is just not on, it's un-Australian, and it needs to stop.